welcome to another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine at recoverytodaymagazine.com, where first and foremost, we are a magazine of hope. Whether you're considering addiction recovery for yourself or a loved one, or you're actively in recovery a short time or maybe many years, you're going to find all kinds of information related to addiction, recovery, and living a happy and successful sober life here at Recovery Today. My name is Rob Hanley, and I'm the producer of Recovery Today, and I'm very excited about my guest, another amazing guest, Mr. Johann Hari. Johann is a British writer and a journalist, and he's written for pretty much everyone you can think of, leading newspapers and magazines, including the New York Times, the LA Times, the Guardian, Spectre, Le Monde Diplomatique, the Melbourne Age, and Politico. He's also a regular panelist on Real Time with Bill Maher, and he's written 2 blockbuster books, one on depression, one on addiction, and also I think he wrote on the monarchy too, which I find very, very interesting. His books I want to make sure I include in here: Lost Connections, which is a book about mental health and depression. Fantastic. I read it. And also his book on addiction called Chasing the Scream. Also off the charts TED Talk, which is how we connected in the first place. Johann, thank you for jumping on here today. I was so excited to speak with you.
Hey Rob, really great to be with you.
All right, so let's jump right into it. So I found you originally, I came across you on your TED Talk on addiction. And I want to really, if it's okay, I want to focus kind of on both. By the way, I myself have suffered depression over the years, pretty bad, so your book on Lost Connections really resonated with me. I just devoured it. But it was very interesting to me because when I was going through Lost Connections, I actually didn't know that you were the guy that I had remembered from the TED Talk on addiction and sobriety. I think it was titled, just off my mind, Everything That You Know About Addiction Is Wrong. And your TED Talk blew me away. As I was reading your book, Lost Connections on Depression, I was like, wow, this kind of sounds like, that reminds me of this guy I saw on this TED Talk. And then, lo and behold, I found out, of course, it's the exact same person. So kind of, I guess, with that, tell me a little bit about your journey and maybe the TED Talk. And we're going to rabbit trail on a number of different things because I just couldn't think of enough questions to ask you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I guess both my books are really about very intense personal questions that I wanted to understand for myself. I'm not an expert. I'm a journalist. I was trained in the social sciences at Cambridge University, so I have a pretty good grounding in understanding how the science of these things work, but I'm definitely not an expert. And I think and in a way I think of them both in a way as kind of detective books, right? Because they're about mystery. So for Chasing the Scream, which is about addiction, I wrote that because one of my earliest memories is of trying to wake up one of my relatives and not being able to. And I was a little boy then, so I didn't understand why. But as I got older, I realized we had actually several forms of addiction in my family, drug and gambling addiction. And when I started writing the book in 2011, like a lot of people in that position, I didn't know what to do. I felt like nothing I was doing was making any positive contribution. I felt really lost, I felt quite angry. And so I ended up going on this journey, and I didn't realize how big it would be at the start. I ended up going on this 30,000-mile journey all over the world to try to understand what causes addiction, and I think crucially, what actually reduces addiction, and particularly addiction epidemics. I've been thinking about this a lot in the United States. I've spent half a year in the United States, so I've been thinking a lot about this, particularly in the last few years, because, for example, I went to a country that had an opioid crisis as severe as the one that the United States is currently having, and they ended it, right?
Portugal.
No, this is Switzerland. Portugal had an addiction crisis. I'm very happy to talk about Switzerland, but they ended their opioid crisis now.
Wow.
How? And they did it, by the way, by doing the opposite of what the United States is currently doing. So that was Chasing the Scream. My TED Talk is based on a chapter in Chasing the Scream. When it comes to Lost Connections, my more recent book, again, I really wrote that because there were these 2 big mysteries that were hanging over me. And I was quite frightened to look into them, to be honest. So the first mystery is, I'm 40 years old, and every year that I've been alive, depression and anxiety had increased in the United States, in Britain, and across the entire Western world. And I was like, what's going on? Why are so many of us, so many more of us with each year that passes, finding it really hard to get through the day? There must be something going on here. What could it possibly be? We're now at a point where 1 in 3 middle-aged women in the United States on any given day are having to drug themselves with antidepressants to get through the day. Even taking opioids, even more are feeling terrible and not taking antidepressants or opioids. What's happening? And I wanted to understand this because of a more personal mystery. When I was a teenager, I remember going to my doctor and saying that I had a feeling like pain was leaking out of me, and I couldn't control it, I couldn't regulate it. I felt very ashamed of it and puzzled by it, actually. And I remember my doctor told me a story that I now realize was really oversimplified. It's not totally untrue, but it's really oversimplified. My doctor said, we know why people feel like this. Some people just naturally have something wrong with their brain. They have a chemical imbalance, or they have a low level of a chemical called serotonin, just spontaneously. You're clearly one of those people. All we need to do is give you this drug, you're going to be fine. So I started taking a drug called Paxil, and I did significantly better for a while, for a few months, and then this feeling of pain came back. So I went back to my doctor. Again, I felt better. Again, this feeling of pain came back. And I was really in this cycle of taking higher and higher doses until for 13 years I was taking the maximum possible dose I was allowed to take. And I was still really depressed. And I was asking myself, well, okay, what's going on here? Because I'm doing everything I'm being told to do by the story our culture is telling about depression. And yet I'm still depressed. And so again, for that book, I went on this big journey. It was over 40,000 miles this time. I wanted to sit with the leading experts in the world about depression, what causes depression, what solves depression, and I went to places that have had terrible, that have pioneered solutions to terrible depression and anxiety epidemics. And again, I think with both of these questions, with addiction and with depression, one of the things I learned is when you understand what's actually driving these crises, once you change the story so it fits the facts in a more complex way, that actually opens up a whole new set of solutions that you can't see if you're thinking about the problem in too narrow or simplistic a way. And that was true of both addiction and depression. I went to places that had found ways to massively reduce these problems. And it's really revealing they're doing the opposite of what we do in the United States.
That is, so of course that leaves hanging right there, like, okay, so let's contrast what's going on in the United States, and then let's talk about, because, I mean, of course, before I had devoured your book, I was like, well, what's the answer? What is it? Why? So maybe let's start out with kind of the why. Like, why are we, from your traveling the globe, 40,000 miles, all of these experts, I mean, that alone, by the way, is quite remarkable. And I'm going to give several plugs for your book in here because I was so over the moon about it. One thing that I loved about it was it's not just something that's like anecdotal stories. Every single thing that's in there is like, this research was done at this university, this research. Everything is like cited in terms of hardcore, double-blind type of research that's in there. So that was why I was so intrigued by this. But let's kind of start with, what is your hypothesis or conclusion that you think, why are we experiencing? And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's somewhat the same thing, addiction, and because I just think it's mental illness, and it's manifesting in different areas. People that are, maybe they're just, they're not depressed, but they're addicted. And then there's people over here that are depressed, or they once were. So I guess the first question I would say is, why? What do you hypothesize? What's going on? Why is it getting to be more?
I think it's important to stress again, I'm not an expert.
Yep.
It's not a hypothesis. What was surprising to me, interviewing the leading experts in the world, was to discover that the leading medical body in the world, the World Health Organization, by far the most prestigious medical body in the world, says that we are profoundly misunderstanding the causes of depression and other mental health problems, and that's leading us to get the solutions wrong. So it's important to stress this is not my view. I mean, obviously some of the details are my view, but the broad thing is the position of the World Health Organization. So this isn't some fringe position. This is it's the view of the leading scientific expert of the United Nations, for example, who said when we want to understand these crises, we need to talk less about chemical imbalances and more about power imbalances. So it was a big journey because let's talk about addiction first, and obviously we only get to a small amount of this huge complex picture, but if we think about addiction to start with. So I had a very clear story of addiction in my head when I started doing this research, right? I didn't actually think I was going to find a different story about the causes of addiction. I just thought I'd find different kind of political responses. If you said to me, when I started doing this research, what causes, let's say, heroin addiction, because that was very close to me, I would have looked at you like you're an idiot. And I would have said, well, Rob, the clue's in the name. Heroin addiction is caused by heroin, right? We've been told this story for 100 years. It's become totally part of our common sense. It was certainly part of mine. So we think that if, I'm sitting here, I've just got back to London, we think if I kidnapped the next 20 people to walk past my house on this rainy street, and I injected them all with heroin every day for a month, like a villain in a Saw movie, at the end of that month, they'd all be heroin addicts for a simple reason. There are chemical hooks in heroin that their bodies would desperately physically crave by the end of that long period of exposure, and they'd have this incredible and tremendous physical hunger for the drug, and that's what addiction is, right? That's what I thought. Addiction is caused by the chemical hook in the drug. That's why we call it being hooked. Now, that story isn't totally untrue. There's some truth in that. But it's actually a very small part of a much bigger picture. The first thing that alerted me to that was so early in the research, I was interviewing doctors here in London, and it was explained to me, if I step out of this interview now and I walk across the street and I get hit by a truck and I break my hip, I'll be taken to hospital and I'll be given loads of a drug called diamorphine for the pain. Diamorphine is heroin. It's much better than the stuff you don't buy off the street, right?
It's the good stuff.
Exactly. It's medically pure, doesn't have all the contaminants and the crap that gets put in at the process of an illegal distribution. People in British hospitals are given diamorphine for quite long periods of time. If anyone watching this has a British grandmother who's had a hip replacement operation, your grandmother has taken a lot of heroin. Now, if what we think is right, just by exposure to the drug, what should be happening to all these people in British hospitals who have been given heroin? Them should be leaving and trying to score on the streets, right? This is studied very carefully. There's really good research in it. It virtually never happens, right? This tells us something really important about the story we're telling about the opioid crisis, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I remember when I first learned that, I just thought that can't be right. How can you have a situation you've got someone in a hospital bed who's been given really good, powerful, potent heroin, and they don't become addicted, and then you've got someone in the alleyway outside taking actually a much weaker form of the drug who does? How can that be, right? And I kept thinking about it. I kept looking at the evidence. I could see that it was true, but I couldn't make sense of it because I was locked in that story I'd been told. And then I only began to understand it when I went to the downtown east side of Vancouver. I interviewed an incredible man who you should totally interview, Rob. He's an extraordinary person. Professor Alexander. I'll give you an intro to him after if you like. So he did an experiment that's really transformed how we think about addiction and led to some amazing changes all over the world. So Professor Alexander explained to me this story we've got in our heads. That addiction is caused primarily or entirely by the chemical hook in the drug. It came from partly a series of experiments that were done earlier in the 20th century. They're really simple experiments. Your viewers can try them at home if they get a little bit fool and sadistic. You take a rat, you put it in a cage, and you give it 2 water bottles. One is just water, the other is water laced with either heroin or cocaine. If you do that, the rat will almost always prefer the drug water and almost always kill itself within a couple of weeks, right? So there you go, that's our story. But in the 70s, Professor Alexander came along and said, well, look at these experiments. And he was like, wait a minute. We put the rat alone in an empty cage. It's got nothing that makes life meaningful for rats. What would happen if we did this differently? So he built a cage that he called Rat Park, which is basically like heaven for rats. They got loads of things, they got loads of cheese, they got loads of coloured balls, They can have loads of sex.
Right.
Anything in life is there in Rat Park, right? For rats. And they've got both the water bottles, the normal water and the drug water, and of course they try both. This is the fascinating thing. In Rat Park, they don't like the drug water.
Wow.
They hardly use it. None of them ever use it compulsively. None of them ever overdose.
That alone is amazing to me.
It's extraordinary. You go from almost 100% compulsive use and overdose when rats do not have the things that make life meaningful to none when they do have the things that make life meaningful. And there's lots of human examples, and there's lots of other points to make. But to me, the core thing I took from this is the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, important though that is to many people, precious though to many people. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Let me just underscore that for just a moment because it is so profound. So the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. So that was one of the groundbreaking things that in your TED Talk, and then it came through in the book, and I was like, wow, this sounds like the same person. So, I just wanted to kind of interject.
I think, no, that's really helpful. I think it's also important to think about what that doesn't mean, right? So I'm happy to talk about how chemical hooks are real and well they do if you want, but and remind me about that. But so my more recent book about depression in some ways flowed from Rat Park because firstly I'll talk about the connection between depression and addiction and I'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So I think the core of addiction is about trying not to be present in your life because your life is too painful a place to be.
Yeah.
Right? And that's true across the board, whether it's heroin addiction is obviously an anesthetic, but let's think about gambling addiction, which is something very close to me and my family. Again, that's a way of not being present, right? You watch someone who's playing online poker, they are not present with their pain in the period in which they're doing it.
Yep.
It helps us to understand why what the US is doing is such a catastrophe. Because the war on drugs is premised on if someone's got an addiction problem, we need to inflict more pain and more suffering on them to make them stop. But once you understand that pain is the driver of addiction, the fuel for it, you can see why that's such a crazy proposal, because actually adding more pain makes the problem worse. I mean, I went out in Arizona with a group of women who were made to go out on a chain gang wearing T-shirts saying I was a drug addict, while members of the public mocked them and jeered at them, right? What happens to those women? Do they leave suddenly freed of their shame, pain, and addiction? Of course not. Their addiction's even worse when they leave, right?
Scarlet letter, modern-day scarlet letter.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I never thought of it quite like that. I think it's a really good way of putting it. And I think, if we think about Rat Park, right, so one of the things that people ask me, so rats are much less complicated than human beings, obviously. So one of the things, and there's loads of human examples of the principles in Rat Park, but one of the things that a lot of people perfectly reasonably rightly asked me, when I was talking about this is, so are you saying that this is, that if the opposite of addiction is connection, are you saying that connection is simply a matter of social connection, of being cared about, of having people around you? And people would say totally reasonably, but I love my husband and he's still addicted. I know loads of people who've got lots of people who love them and still have an addiction problem. And I always knew that Rat Park was more, I always felt intuitively that Rat Park, and Bruce Alexander, who did the experiment, certainly thinks this, was about something more complex than merely social connection, the presence of friends. But I didn't feel I had a very confident or complex answer to that. And in some ways, Lost Connections is the journey I went on to try to understand that. Because I actually think we are profoundly disconnected from many things that we need as human beings in this culture and this society, or a lot of us are, not everyone. And one of the concepts that helped me to understand a big part of it, not all of it, is a very simple concept. It's been talked about in psychology since the 1950s. Everyone watching this or reading it knows that they have natural physical needs, obviously. You need food, you need shelter, you need clean air. If I took those things away from you, you'd be in real trouble real fast. But there's equally strong evidence that all human beings have natural psychological needs. You need to feel you belong.
Yep.
You need to feel your life has meaning and purpose. You need to feel your work has meaning and purpose. You need to feel that people see you and value you. You need to feel you've got a future that is stable and makes sense. And this culture we've built is good at lots of things. I'm glad to be alive today. I love Netflix and dentistry and gay marriage, but we've been getting less and less good at meeting these deep underlying psychological needs. And it's not the only thing that's going on, but I think it's the key reason why these epidemics are rising and rising. So let's think about this in relation to the opioid crisis. I think it's one of the things I'm most one of the things I think is really important to explain to people in the United States at the moment is everyone knows how horrific and catastrophic the opioid crisis is.
Yep.
I mean, more Americans have died in the opioid crisis now than have died in the Vietnam War by quite a long way.
And Afghanistan combined, I think.
Yeah, all the wars since the Second World War. And I think a lot about, I've been to places like Monadnock in New Hampshire, which is one of the epicenters of the crisis, and I think a lot about people who I've got to know who are in a terrible way. And so there's a story that's being told about the opioid crisis, which I think neglects the insights of Rat Park and neglects the best evidence. So the dominant story about the opioid crisis, you said to people, why is the opioid crisis happening? Most people will tell a story which is an adjusted version of what Nancy Reagan said about the so-called crack epidemic in the 1980s, which is a bunch of evil drug dealers came along, in this case the drug dealers of the Sackler family. A bunch of evil drug dealers came along. They gave people this uniquely powerful drug.
Yeah.
The chemical hooks in that powerful drug hijacked people and took them over. And that's why this crisis happened.
Mm.
And that is a dangerously oversimplified story that is leading us away from the solutions. So to explain that, I would step back and explain why chemical hooks are real, but what role they actually play. So we know there's really good research on this. Actually, some of the people listening to this will have taken part in this kind of national experiment. So we know that one of the most powerful chemical hooks out there is nicotine, right? You smoke tobacco.
For sure.
You have a physical craving for nicotine. I know this a lot because my mother, who's a working class Scottish woman, she smokes 70 cigarettes a day. And there's an amazing photograph of me and her when I'm 6 months old. She's breastfeeding me, smoking, and resting the actor in my stomach. When I discovered this photograph a few years ago and showed it to her, I thought she'd be really apologetic. She said, "You were a difficult baby. I needed that cigarette." But so, in the short term, when my mother stopped smoking, the thing she physically craves is nicotine. She almost got arrested on a flight recently for trying to smoke. And we know that that's one of the most powerful chemicals. You can measure it by the amount of physical craving people have, right? That's real. So until the late 1980s, it was basically thought that is what smoking addiction is. It's the physical craving for nicotine. So when scientists invented nicotine patches, there is this huge wave of optimism because they're like, wow, we can give people all of this chemical hook and none of this filthy cancer-causing smoke. Amazing, people are going to stop smoking. Yeah. So nicotine patches become commercially available. Loads of people will remember this. My mother used to wear 4 a day. I mean, 4 at the same time. Like, absolutely fabulous. And what do we know? The US Surgeon General's report about 3 years later did a really good detailed research into this. And what they found is 17% of highly motivated smokers, given the chemical hook, nicotine, through nicotine patches, will stop smoking. That's huge, right? That affects the lives of, globally, millions of people.
Sure.
That shows the chemical hooks are real. I mean, we knew that already, but it's further evidence the chemical hooks are real. Tells us they play a real role. And it tells us that meeting the chemical hook will mean that 17% of people can stop. It also leaves us with another 83% of people where something else is going on, right? And a big part of that, I mean, there's lots of things, but a big part of that is these unmet psychological needs. We all know smoking is a way of soothing anxiety, of calming yourself, and quite an effective way of calming yourself and soothing yourself.
Yep.
Along with other things. So let's think about this in relation to the opioid crisis. There's strong agreement among scientists. Nicotine is a more potent chemical hook than the things that are in opioids, right?
Yep.
So what we're told is the chemical hook uniquely is the thing that took everyone over. And we need to get the chemical hook away from people. We need to stop giving it to people.
Yep.
But actually, let's look at where the opioid crisis is happening. So let's compare West Virginia, where the opioid crisis is horrific, causing an enormous amount of death, to the faculty at Harvard, where virtually nobody is addicted to opioids. Now, if it was driven solely by access to the chemical hooks, the faculty at Harvard should be much more addicted because they all have medical insurance, excellent medical insurance. Anyone who gets an injury at the Harvard faculty can go and get Percocet in like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Virginia, through no fault of the people of West Virginia who've been economically devastated and destroyed by forces outside West Virginia, which they never deserved and never should have had inflicted on them.
Yep.
The people of West Virginia have very poor levels of medical insurance compared to fancy people. It's actually much harder for them to get hold of the drug. So what's going on here, right? Sir Angus Dayton, brilliant social scientist, and Professor Anne Case, who's also brilliant, have done really important research on this, and they showed something really important. Where is the opioid crisis happening? It's happening in the places where people have been most deprived of the things that make life worth living. They've been made acutely lonely. They've been made unbelievably financially insecure. They've been humiliated. They are controlled and humiliated at work. Professor Sir Angus Dayton calls these deaths of despair. It is not a coincidence the opioid deaths are happening are highest in the places where suicide is highest, where antidepressant prescription is highest. Now, if it was just a matter of being exposed to the drug and the drug taking you over, why would it be happening? Why would it track so closely to suicide rates? That makes no sense, right?
Right.
But when you understand the lesson of Rat Park, the opposite of addiction is connection, it makes perfect sense. You only have to spend 5 minutes in Monadnock, New Hampshire, to see why people are in real pain, right? Now, of course, you can become disconnected at any level of society.
Yep.
And, you can be Elton John, who's endorsed my book, both my books, actually, and, be at the top of the society and become profoundly disconnected for all sorts of reasons. So I'm not saying...
Millions of people love him. He can look in the mirror and say tens of millions of people, right?
Yeah. I mean, you want to go down the street with Elton John, it's a pretty intense experience, the way people respond. So if you think about, it can happen at any level, but and you can be deprived of your psychological needs at any level in the economic ladder. It's disproportionately happening in the places where people are most stressed, anxious, and have been deprived of their basic needs. Now, we think about this in relation to the opioid crisis, and one of the things I love about Recovery Today and what you do is your emphasis on hope, right? One of the most important things to explain is, I have been to a place that had an opioid crisis as severe as this, and they ended it, right? And it's really important to understand they did the opposite of what the US is doing. So let's think about the reaction to the opioid crisis within the United States. If you've got a story that it's the evil drug dealers giving people these uniquely powerful chemical hooks, there's an obvious solution. Well, let's stop the evil drug dealers from giving people these chemical hooks, right?
Yeah, sure.
What happens when you do that? Dr. Hal Vorse in Oklahoma, who I interviewed, is a very good, one of many people who's done really interesting work on this. So let's say that I've got a Percocet or an Oxy addiction. Because my life is really gone to pieces and I'm using that to get through the day and to numb myself from the profound pain that I feel when I am not drugged. And then someone comes along and says, your problem is that these chemical hooks have overtaken you. We're going to cut off your prescription. We know what happens. Joel Bromgar in Mississippi has also done really good research on it. What happens is some people do just stop. Usually they then feel horrifically depressed, right? Because you haven't dealt with the problem. I mean, you've dealt with some of the problem, but you've not dealt with the underlying problem.
Exactly.
And lots of them go and try to buy their drug on the street. Now, for various reasons that I'm happy to explain, Percocet and Oxy are much more expensive on the street than heroin or fentanyl. So what do? You actually transfer to buying the more powerful drug on the street, where it is way more dangerous. Now, the prescription drug contains its dangers, to be sure, but you then end up buying and using much more dangerous drugs. This is why, as Joel Bromgar in Mississippi and other people have shown, and Professor Jeffrey Myron at Harvard University and others, the death rate actually goes up when you throw people off, right? Now, there can be a case for restricting initial prescriptions for some people. I do think there's a case for that. But this model of, let's just stop the evil drug dealer, and it's worth saying, the Sackler family are terrible people, and I hope they go to prison. Awful, I hope they lose everything and go to prison. I'm not in any way defending them. They deliberately mismarketed these drugs. They massively underplayed the risk from the part are real chemical hoax. All sorts of reasons to loathe and despise these people who don't misunderstand me. But let's look at the country that actually solved its opioid crisis. What did they do, right? So Switzerland, in the 1990s, had a horrific heroin epidemic. And I know this well because my dad's from Switzerland, so I'm a Swiss citizen. I've spent a lot of time in Switzerland. And, you know, I mean, it was just awful in the 90s. You had, people will remember the famous scenes of, you know, people in parks in Switzerland, in Zurich and Geneva and Thun and other places, just injecting in the neck in public, like real nightmare scenes. Mm-hmm. And they tried the American way. They tried to restrict supply by cracking down on dealers. They shamed and stigmatized the users, chased them around, punished them, and so on. And the problem just kept getting worse. And then one day they got, first as the health minister, then as president, an extraordinary woman I later got to know called Ruth Dreyfus, first ever female president of Switzerland, like candidate for president of the world. And Ruth explained to Swiss people, if we carry on doing this thing that doesn't work anywhere in the world, we'll carry on getting these terrible results. She said to Swiss people, Switzerland is a really conservative country. My Swiss relatives make Donald Trump look like AOC, right? This is a state in the Union. It would be Utah. It would not be, you know, right. California or Oregon, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Ruth explained, President Dreyfus explained to Swiss people, I think the solution to this crisis is to legalize heroin for people with addiction.
Wow, that is pretty big.
And she thought that she was aware this sounded shocking, and she came to this through a long journey herself. She said to people, I know that when you hear the word legalization, what you picture is anarchy and chaos, right?
Yeah.
She said, what we have now is anarchy and chaos.
Yeah.
We have unknown criminals selling unknown chemicals to unknown drug users, all in the dark, all filled with violence, disease, and chaos. Legalization, she said, is the way we restore order to this chaos. Now, it's important to understand what she doesn't want, right? If you think about legalization, I don't know the rule in Washington State where you are, but I'm pretty sure it would be legal for you, if you wanted to own a dog, a monkey, and a lion. But I'm pretty sure the rules are different, right? A dog, you can just go into a store. A monkey, I suspect you might have to get a license in Seattle. And a lion, I'm sure they come and inspect your house and make sure you're not a crazy person, right?
Probably, yep.
They're all legal, but they're legal in very different ways, right?
Yep.
No one in Switzerland or anywhere in the world, apart from maybe some super hardcore libertarian, is proposing legalizing heroin the way we have legalized alcohol and in some places cannabis, right? No one is you should be able to go into there should be a heroin aisle in CVS, right? No one thinks that, right? So the model of legalization that the President Dreyfus proposed was, and I went to see some practice, was if you've got a heroin problem, you're assigned to a clinic. You go to that clinic. I went to the one in Geneva. Just so you know, President Dreyfus, no longer the president, lives almost directly opposite this clinic. I think that tells you something.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. You go to this clinic, you have to go at 7 o'clock in the morning, because Swiss people believe in doing things insanely early. It's a constant disagreement between me and my dad. You go at 7 o'clock in the morning, you're given your heroin there, it's medically pure heroin. You have to use it, a nurse will watch you using it, you can't take it out with you, partly because they don't want you to sell it on, and partly because they want to make sure you're okay. And then you leave, and you go either to your therapy or your job, because you're given a massive amount of support to turn your life around. You're given housing, you're given subsidized work if you need it. You're given therapy to find out why you were so distressed and trying to not be so present in your life. And one of the things that was so striking to me, so let's think about these two parts, right? It's very important to contrast it with what US does. The two things they do are give you the drug, give you massive amount of support to figure out why you feel you need the drug for as long as you want it, right? Wow. So massive support to deal with the underlying cause, right? Giving you the drug is the thing that gets you through the door. It stops the chaos of street addiction, stops people prostituting themselves or committing street crime. And then it's like, okay, now you're here, we're going to deal with the underlying problem, right? And one of the things that really shocked me in Switzerland, in this clinic where I spent quite a lot of time, was they will give you any dose you want, except one that will kill you, and there is never any pressure to cut back. And yet, when I went there, it had been open for 13 years, and there were like 2 people from the beginning who were still there. And I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. If I'm a heroin addict and you're giving me an infinite free supply of heroin,
right?
Why would I ever stop, right? Because I believe the next thing you can take over account. And Dr. Rita Mangi, who runs that clinic, said to me, she looked at me like I was an idiot, and she said, well, we help them, and their lives get better, and as their lives get better, they don't want to be addicted so much.
Rat Park.
Exactly. And it's worth just explaining the consequences of the Swiss program. So I'll just say to anyone watching, how many people do you think have died of heroin overdoses on the legal program in Switzerland in the 15 years it's been in place?
I got it. What is it?
Not a single person.
That's crazy.
One person. And there's been an enormous fall in heroin overdoses outside the legal program, because who wants to carry on buying shitty contaminated street heroin when you could be getting the good stuff for free, right? Along with maximum support and love and help. There was a really amazing moment, I think, when one time after the clinic had been open for 3 or 4 years, President Dreyfus went to be shown around the clinic, and a guy came up to her, one of the patients, and handed her a piece of paper and just scuttled off, and she couldn't really do something. So she went back to her office, the president's office, and she was sitting in the president's office, and she read the letter, and the letter said, when I first came to this clinic, I was homeless, my life had completely fallen apart, I was in a terrible state. I came here, they helped me, they got me housing, they got me therapy, they helped me to think about why my life had fallen apart, and helped me turn it around. And he said, I'm not sure I should tell you this, but if you walk out of your office and you walk 4 doors down, I now work for you in the president's office. You'll see me in that office there. And to me, that reminds me of the enormous human transformation that happened in Switzerland, right? And it's also worth saying, like I say, Swiss people are really conservative. After this program had been in place for, I think it was 4 years, Swiss people had a referendum on it. They have referendums all the time in Switzerland. And they voted, and 70% of Swiss people voted to keep heroin legal. Not because they're so compassionate, they're not, to be honest. There was just a massive fall in crime, and it's so much cheaper. It is so much cheaper to help people and love them and value them than to imprison them, right? To all the police chasing them, putting them on trial, putting them in prison. The Swiss model, which actually works. But again, contrast those 2 things. So just say again, the Swiss program, 1, give you the drug. 2, give you massive amount of support so you won't feel you need the drug. What are we doing in the US? Literally the opposite. Yeah. Take away the drug, and instead of giving you support, we'll give you a criminal record, we'll shame you, we'll punish you, we'll put barriers between you and reconnecting to a decent life. Now, if we carry on doing the opposite of what works, we will carry on getting deteriorating results, right? Now, there are some places where there's been progress, right? There are some places...
Real quick, let me interject on that note there. I had thought originally that we were going to talk about that it would be Portugal. So can you contrast Portugal? Is it the same kind of results? Because I had no idea about Switzerland at all.
Yeah. So Portugal has a slightly different model. Also one that's been incredibly effective in a slightly different way. And it's worth thinking about these different models, because different models will be right for different places. So Portugal in the year 2000 had the worst drug problem in the whole of Europe, just ahead of Switzerland actually. They had 1% of the population was addicted to heroin, which is staggering. And they tried the American way all the time, arresting, shaming, imprisoning. Like in Switzerland, it kept getting worse and worse. And one day the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition got together and were like, look, we can't go on like this. It'd be like if President Trump and Nancy Pelosi got together and said that. Hard to imagine, I know. And said, you know, what are we going to do? So they decided to do something quite bold, something nobody had done since the global drug war had begun 70 years before. They said, shall we ask some scientists to figure it out? So this panel of scientists and doctors, led by an amazing man I got to know later, called Dr. João Gulão. And they said, you guys go away, figure out what would genuinely solve this problem, and we've agreed in advance we'll do whatever you recommend.
Wow.
The panel went away, just took it out of politics, right? All the main political parties, apart from the far right party, agreed. So, panel goes away. They look at Rat Park. They look at loads of things. They look at some things, experiments that happen in Britain, all over the world. And they come back and they say, decriminalize all drugs, from cannabis to crack, the whole lot. But, and this is the crucial next step, take all the money we currently spend on screwing people's lives up, shaming them, imprisoning them, and spend all that money instead on turning their lives around. Some of that was residential rehab, some of that was therapy. A lot of it was just something as simple as a job creation program.
Yeah.
You say you have a heroin problem. They go to a garage and they say, if you employ this guy for a year, we'll pay half his wages.
Crazy.
The goal was to say to every person with an addiction problem in Portugal, we love you, we value you, we're on your side, we want you back. And by the time I went to Portugal, it had been in place for, I think, 12 years, this program, this transformation. And the results are really clear. The best scientific study of it in the British Journal of Criminology found there was a 50% fall in addiction. 50%. Massive fall in overdose. Massive fall in HIV transmission among people with addiction problems. Just on every single indicator, there was an enormous improvement. And one of the ways you know it works so well is no one in Portugal, virtually nobody, wants to go back. I went and interviewed a man called João Figueira, who led the opposition to the decriminalisation when it first happened. He was the top drug cop in the country. And at the time he said what lots of people listening to this will totally reasonably be thinking, which is, surely if you decriminalise all drugs, you'll have an explosion in drug use, especially teen drug use, all sorts of problems. And João Figueira said to me, everything I said would happen didn't happen. And everything the other side said would happen did. And he talked about how he felt really ashamed that he'd spent so many years prior to the decriminalisation shaming and stigmatising people, which he now realised made their addictions worse, and it could have been helping them turn their lives around. And this is something I saw everywhere in the world, right? From, I went to places that had the most tough, in inverted commas, policies of addiction. Vietnam, for example, where they make people with addiction problems go into forced labour camps, right?
Wow.
What happens, according to research by the Open Society Foundation, 99% of them leave and immediately relapse, right? This idea that the solution is tough love or the infliction of more pain and more cruelty, it's not to say there shouldn't be, people shouldn't establish boundaries, of course. Loving someone doesn't mean give them everything they want all the time, obviously. But all the places that have punishment-based models have catastrophic addiction crises. And all the places that have models based on love and compassion are not perfect by any means. Still got big problems in Portugal, Switzerland, but there's such a big fall that even the skeptics, the people who initially think it's a crazy idea, change their minds.
Is there hope then for the United States, and maybe I'll extend that to Britain, not really knowing, but I kind of think them akin, almost the same kind of thing, or is it the fact that big pharma is too big, that there's too much money in putting people in jails? The jails are they're private corporations. There's the big pharma cartel. There's the insurance cartel. This is really the powers that be. I'm wondering, was it possible in Switzerland and maybe Portugal, because they're so tiny and they don't have that much influence, and to those that really run things, they're really fairly meaningless?
It's true that there are some big interests who are deeply invested in keeping the drug war going, right? And you can see who they are by looking at who funds the no campaigns whenever marijuana legalization is on the ballot. They're the alcohol companies who want there to be only one legal form of intoxicant. There's some religious groups who don't have a financial interest, that's an ideological thing, and who are admirable in some other ways. And there's the prison guard unions and the police unions. And at another level, although they're not funding these campaigns, I want to stress that, the other big area of support for the drug war is from armed criminal gangs who have been handed 5% of the world's economy. I know Pablo Escobar's son, Sebastian Marroquin, who's a wonderful person. You should be seeing him as well. Great guy. And he said to me, the only thing my father ever feared was drug legalization. He said if drugs had been legal, my dad would have been a used car salesman and none of you would have ever heard his name. So that's the other, so you've got forces on the side of maintaining the drug war. But I wouldn't want to overstate that. Well, firstly, we have changes all the time where we overcome vested interests, right? There was a lot of vested interest in maintaining slavery, to choose one obvious example. That was, whatever it was, 30% of the American economy, I believe. We overcame that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it took a while, and people remember some unpleasant history. Every piece of progress has to overcome some group that want to maintain the injustice, right? That's just that. If you didn't have to overcome something, it would be done already, right?
Yeah.
I actually don't think the main barrier to change is those groups. I don't want to underestimate their power and influence, the vested interest. They're real. It's big. The main reason is, essentially, if you look at the opinion polling on drug policy in the United States, most people, by huge majorities, it's more than 80%, say the war on drugs has failed and will never succeed, right? So it's not like there's some huge constituency of people who are saying, what we're doing now is great, look at how great the results are, let's carry on doing that. The main reason we're not breaking that, there's many reasons, but I think the biggest is because people are afraid of the alternatives, right? And that's not an irrational fear, that's not a crazy fear that you can understand. It sounds like and it is a big thing when you say let's decriminalize all drugs, let's legalize heroin, a whole range of things. You can see people's fears that's not just that they're bigots or awful people or anything like that. These are understandable fears. This is why I think it's so important to explain to people the alternatives. There's one thing, if we think about changes in drug policy, when Bill Clinton left office, not that long ago, the day George W. Bush becomes president. So, we remember that, not that long ago. 15% of Americans supported, US citizens supported legalizing marijuana or cannabis.
Wow.
Today, it's more than 65%, right?
Yep.
So a very short period of time from the inauguration of President Bush II to the inauguration of President Trump, you have an enormous transformation in public opinion, right?
Yep.
I mean, I've lived through almost unimaginable changes. Whenever I get pessimistic about some of these questions, I always I write about him a bit in Lost Connections, as you know. A friend of mine is a writer called Andrew Sullivan. Lots of people will know his work. He's a great writer. And in 1993, at the height of the AIDS crisis, Andrew was diagnosed as HIV positive, when that was a death sentence, right? There was no hope, nothing on the horizon. Andrew's best friend Patrick had just died of AIDS. And Andrew quit his job. He was the editor of the New Republic, the magazine. And he went to a little place in Cape Cod called Provincetown to die. And he decided to do one last thing before he died. He decided he was going to write a book about an idea that no one had ever written a book about. An idea that he said, well, this is obviously a really utopian idea. I'm never going to live to see it happen. No one alive today is going to live to see it happen. But maybe someone further down the line will pick up this idea, right? Maybe someone generations from now. The idea that Andrew wrote the first book advocating for was gay marriage, right? And when I get depressed and I think, oh, we're up against such powerful forces, I try to imagine going back in time to Provincetown in 1993 and saying to Andrew, okay, you're not going to believe me, Andrew, but 6 years from now, first thing, you're going to be alive, right? That would have seemed like a miracle to him.
Yeah.
Second thing, you're going to be married to a man. That's going to be legal. Third thing, the Supreme Court of the United States is going to quote this book you're writing now when it makes it mandatory for every state in the United States to introduce gay marriage. And fourth thing, I'll be with you the next day when the President of the United States invites you to a White House that is going to be lit up in the colors of the rainbow flag to celebrate what you and so many other people have achieved. Oh, and by the way, fifth thing, that president, he's going to be black, right? Every aspect of that would have sounded like the most ludicrous science fiction. It'd be like me saying to you, hey, Rob, 26 years from now, we're going to be invited by a transgender president to smoke crack in the Oval Office, right? Not that we want that. I mean, yes, the crack, no. But you see what I'm saying, right? That extraordinary transformations happen all the time. And they happen because people band together and fight for them. They don't happen because
just reaching this. Maybe it's just reaching this tipping point type of a thing. I think that my personal opinion is I think that within the next couple of years, I think that you'll start to see, in the U.S., I think you'll start to see federal decriminalization of marijuana. I think because, personally, I think that there's undeniable medical benefits to the cannabinoids and even to THC itself. I personally don't think that it is a gateway. Personally, it's my personal opinion. I think that it makes you, to a large degree, sit around and, maybe loss of motivation, a lot of Oreos and Netflix and things like that, maybe, but people generally not breaking into houses to support their habit. But I guess to come around to two of the big things that I took away from both of your books, and I want to really move back as much as we can from the geopolitical side and the cartels and the powers that be, if we can, into something that's a little bit more solution-based and revelatory, I think, which is two things. We've talked about connections, but the other one was actually purpose. And specifically, as somebody that I medicate myself, if you will, for depression through a couple of things. Is number one, there's alternatives and things like that you talked about in your book. I like to go to the gym, release endorphins, dopamine, and I think it also creates a feedback loop, how you look at yourself, you see your perception of how other people perceive you, you feel stronger and healthier and things like that, of that nature. I also love, I forget what the U.S. Admiral's book, he did a talk, said, make your bed. I'm guessing that you probably know about Make Your Bed. First thing in the morning, it releases dopamine. But I've talked to people and self-talk to myself about connections and purpose. And I found that to be a common denominator in both your depression book, Lost Connections and Chasing the Scream, about Portugal, about how, and even the Vietnam War that you mentioned in Lost Connections, about how they thought all the opiate, all the heroin users, everybody in Vietnam used heroin, we're going to have an epidemic, and they came back and they went to their jobs and they went back to their families and things of that nature. Without kind of decriminalizing, what can we do maybe on an individual basis? And again, this is from your research, what you would tell a friend, I guess. What is it that we can do one by one by one by one? I try to tell the people that I can connect with, and people in our magazine, we love you, we care about you. Every single person is valuable. And then also find some kind of purpose. What do we do on an individual basis for maybe both of these?
Well, I'll talk about that in a second, but I think I slightly reject the idea there's a separation between the big social stuff and the individual stuff. The big social stuff happens because individuals fight for it, right?
Yes.
So the thing I would say, Bruce Alexander, who did the Rat Park experiment, says, we talk all the time in addiction about individual recovery. That is really important. But we need to talk about social recovery. Something's gone wrong with us, not just as isolated individuals, but as a group.
Yeah.
So the main, I would say, actually, it's not like decriminalization is a thing out there and then there's you. Decriminalization will happen if enough of us band together and fight for it. So I would direct people towards brilliant groups like the Drug Policy Alliance. In fact, at chasingthescream.com, there's a list of groups that people can join to fight for the ending of the mass punishment of people with addiction problems and the move towards using that money to help them and love them and turn their lives around. In terms of things, though, I totally get the point you're making, which is, so that's a big political fight. I believe everyone should be in it, whether you have an addiction problem or not. But there are also, of course, there are other things we need to do in our individual lives. Give you an example, I think, that's really related to purpose. And I found this very challenging, actually, when I learned about it for Lost Connections. So everyone knows that junk food has taken over our diets and made us physically sick, right? You can see from my gyms, I'm not immune to that. There's equally strong evidence that a kind of junk values have taken over our minds and made us mentally sick. So for thousands of years, philosophers have said, if you think life is about money and status and showing off and how you look to other people in a shallow way, you're going to feel like shit, right? That's not an exact quote from Confucius, but that is the gist of what he said.
Yep.
But nobody had scientifically investigated this until an incredible man I got to know, who you should totally interview, called Professor Tim Kasser. He's at Knox College in Illinois. And Professor Kasser showed a few really important things. He showed the more you think life is about money and status and showing off, and buying things and displaying them, the more likely you are to become depressed and anxious, by quite a significant amount. He also showed, as a society, we have become much more driven by these kind of junk values, by these things that I think are like junk food, by displaying things, showing them off, thinking that's what. Exactly. Instagram is like the distilled, but not that there aren't some good things about Instagram, but at its worst, it's like the distilled version of this, right? And I think that totally relates to this question about needs, right? Everyone listening to your show and reading this interview knows they're not going to lie on their deathbed and think about all the likes they got on Instagram and all the shoes they bought, right? It's about moments of deep meaning and connection and purpose in their life. As Professor Kasser puts it, we live in a machine that is designed to get us to neglect what is important about life. More 18-month-old children in the United States know what the McDonald's M means to know their own last name.
Crazy. So
you are bombarded from the moment you're born with messages that say, if you don't feel good, buy, spend, display, right? And that trains us to seek happiness in all the wrong places. And it's a disaster, right? It's one of the 9 causes of depression and anxiety that I write about in Lost Connections. But one of the things I found really interesting, Professor Kasser discovered a really kind of simple beginning of the solution to this. So he was working with a guy called Nathan Gungan, who I also interviewed. He's a lovely person. Nathan is a financial advisor in Minneapolis. And he would advise adults on budgeting, you know, how to do a household budget and not overspend, that sort of thing. And one day he got a call from a school. It's a middle-class school in Minneapolis. It's not fancy. It's not working class. And they said, look, could you come and talk to our students? Because we've got a real problem here. Our kids are becoming obsessed with getting the latest iPhone 5 or Nike sneakers or whatever it is, some consumer object. It wouldn't have been the iPhone then, it was too long ago, but whatever the equivalent was. And they're getting enraged if they don't get it, or really anxious if they don't get it. They said, will you come in and talk about budgeting to these kids? So he goes in and he talks to them about budgeting and very quickly realizes these kids don't give a shit about budgeting, right? There's something else going on here. Like, why are they so hungry for these pretty useless consumer objects, right?
Yeah.
So he teamed up with Professor Kasser and he did quite a simple experiment. I think it'll actually feel quite familiar to a lot of recovery state people. What he did is he got parents and their teenagers to come and they would meet in big groups. And the first thing they did was just say to them, okay, I want you to make a list of everything you've got to have. It didn't define what that meant.
Right.
People, you know, everyone would put like a house and, you know, a home and a car and that kind of thing first, right? But quite quickly, the teenagers would be saying Nike sneakers.
Right.
Parents would be naming, you know, a fancy car or some shit you really don't need, right?
Right.
You've got to have. And what they would say to them is, okay, describe to me how your life would be different if you got this thing. And nobody named the ostensible use of the object. So no kid said, oh, well, the Nike sneakers will mean I'll be able to jump higher when I play basketball. Or the dads didn't go, or mothers didn't go, right, if I have a Mercedes, I'll be able to drive faster, and that will mean I'll be able to get to perform surgery on some child sooner, you know.
Right,
no one.
right.
It's all about, well, people will envy me. People will up status. People will want to be like me.
Yeah.
It doesn't long to get people to say that out loud, where you're kind of going, why do you think having a blue tick on your shoe, it means that you should be envied? You know, where did that come from? Everyone thinks they're smarter than the advertising, and then you realize these things that we long for and pine for are created by the advertising. But the next part of what they did I thought was the most interesting. So they worked with people in the same group. It comes back every couple of weeks for, I think, 4 months. And after they've kind of deconstructed a bit these junk values, taken them apart, they said, okay, let's talk about moments in your life that have been really meaningful to you, where you learned something that mattered. And they talk about that. And, you know, people have different things. Some people it's playing music, writing, running on the beach, taking their kids to the swimming pool, whatever it is. Then they said, okay, how could you build more of these moments, these deathbed moments, these moments that will be really meaningful to you into your life and less of this chasing after the junk values bullshit? And what was fascinating was just giving people a space to talk about that and come back every couple of weeks and go, you know, I did a bit more of this and a bit less of that, led to a really significant, scientifically significant and measurable decline in these depression-causing values.
Wow.
So I just know we need to get junk food. We need to massively reduce the amount of junk food in our diets. Never get rid of it. I'll never totally give up KFC. We need to reduce the amount of junk values in our culture, in our society, and in our hearts. And just having that conversation is the beginning of it, right? So that's something I would say. That's not nothing you can do as an isolated individual, but you can do it as a group with your friends, right? Just say, every other Friday we're going to meet up and talk about our values and how we translate our values into action, and how we resist this constant hurricane of bullshit telling us, you know, that actually what will make you happy is buying some new shampoo, or, you know, the 10th pair of shoes, or whatever yet another iPhone that's exactly like the last iPhone, except the buttons are slightly smaller or bigger or whatever, right? And the damn thing that you put the electrical charger in is always different. You know, so that's one example. Obviously, the last third of Lost Connections goes through a whole range of these solutions that we can do as individuals and together to change the society and to change the way we live as individuals. But the single most important thing I would want to communicate to you and your listeners is, we can change this, right? We don't have to live like this. And if in this culture that we've built that doesn't meet people's psychological needs, you feel uncomfortable and you feel anxious, that's not a sign you're crazy. That is a sign that you're sane, right?
Wow.
The writer Krishnamurti said said it's no sign of good health to be well adjusted to a sick society, right? We've produced a society that has lots of good things about it, right? Don't misunderstand me.
Yeah.
I love the US. I love Britain. There's loads of great things about the way we live. There's many ways in which society is much better than it used to be. You know, I'm gay. I'm not nostalgic for many aspects of the past. My grandmothers weren't allowed to have bank accounts when they got married. There's all sorts of transformations in the way we live that are really positive, but there are many things that have gotten much worse. And we can change those things, right? We can change those things together. As a gay man, I have been dreamed for things. If you told my 15-year-old self about the changes that have happened in the last 25 years, I literally didn't even hear the concept of gay marriage until I was 20 years old. And when I heard it, I thought, that's never going to happen, right? So think about the amazing things that we can achieve together. Yep. And the one good thing about the scale of the catastrophic crisis that we're facing, the depression epidemic, the anxiety epidemic, the addiction epidemic, is, I would argue, the political crisis as well, people turning to more extreme politicians, all the alarm bells are going off, right? The advantage to all the alarm bells going off is it's harder and harder for people to not hear it. I think what we need to do is reinterpret depression, anxiety, and addiction, because up to now we've been told that they're essentially malfunctions in the individual, right? Yep. They are not functions.
They're not chemical. It's not a deficit. It's not something that's DNA.
There's some biological components, and it's important to stress that you nor I dispute that, right? There are some biological components to addiction and to depression and to anxiety, which are part of a complex picture, and it's like a bathtub with many taps, and some of the biological components for some people, you know, are flowing into the bathtub, right? So it's important to say that there's some role for those things. Yep. Very real. The science for that is unambiguous. There's real biological components, but they interact with the social components, the psychological components. But what we have to do is we have to see that this depression and anxiety epidemic is a signal. It's telling us something, right? We need to start listening to the signal. Because what we've been doing up to now is pathologizing the signal, insulting the signal, telling the people involved that they're crazy, they're weak, they're shameful, whatever it is. That's bullshit. They're telling us something that actually will help the entire society. Rob, I should just say, I've got to go in about 5 minutes, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. So let me jump off, and first of all, man, a wealth of information. I'm going to ask you just here now, I want to have you back again sometime, because I love these kind of cerebral kind of talks, and also all of the data that's in. It's amazing to me. This guy said this, and this guy said this, and this guy said this, that you only get from a investigative journalist or reporter. But one of the things that I liked quite a bit in the book Lost Connections was the story about I think it was in Vietnam, and the antidepressant was a cow. Can you explain a little bit about the cow, that was the kind of their form of a community as an antidepressant?
I found this quite challenging. So I went to interview a lovely man. He's a South African psychiatrist called Derek Summerfield. And Dr. Summerfield happened to be in Cambodia in 2001 when they introduced chemical antidepressants for the first time in that country. So the local doctors, the Cambodians, had never heard of these drugs. They were like, what are they? So he explained. And they said to him, oh, we don't need them. We've already got antidepressants. And he was like, what do you mean? He thought they were going to talk about some kind of herbal remedy, right, like St. John's wort or something.
Right.
Instead, they told him a story. There was a farmer in their community who worked in the rice fields. And one day he stood on a landmine and he got his leg blown off. It was a landmine left over by the war with the United States, obviously. And they gave him an artificial limb. And after a few months, he went back to work in the rice fields. But apparently it's super painful to work underwater when you've got an artificial limb. I'm guessing it was pretty traumatic to go and work in the fields where the guy got blown up. He starts crying all day, refused to get out of bed. He developed classic depression. The doctor said to Dr. Summerfield, the Cambodian doctor said to Dr. Summerfield, well, that's when we gave him an antidepressant. And he said, well, what was it? They explained that they went and sat with him. They listened to him. They realized that his pain made sense. It had causes in his life that were perfectly understandable. One of the doctors had an idea. He said, you know, if we bought this by a guy a cow, he could become a dairy farmer. He wouldn't be in this position that was screwing him up so much. So they bought him a cow. Within a couple of weeks, his crying stopped. Within a month, his depression was gone. They said to Dr. Summerfield, so you see, doctor, that cow, that was an antidepressant. That's what you mean, right? Now, if you've been raised to think about depression the way we have, that it's entirely a problem in your brain, that sounds like a joke. I went to my doctor for an antidepressant. She gave me a cow. But what those Cambodian doctors knew intuitively is what the leading medical body in the world, the World Health Organization, has been trying to tell us for years. If we're depressed, if we're anxious, it doesn't mean you're crazy, it doesn't mean you're weak. You know, it's not a sign that you're a machine with broken parts. It's a sign that you're a human being with unmet needs. And what you need is love and practical support to get those deeper needs met. Now, what those farmers didn't say is, hey, you're on your own. You know, this isn't real. You need to solve it yourself. Right? They saw it's a very real form of distress. But they saw that that individual, so long as he remained isolated, couldn't solve that problem. He needed the people around him to love him and support him. And that's what we do when we live in tribes, which is how human beings evolve. We solve each other's problems, right?
It reminds me of the Amish barn raising. And I know that in your book you mentioned, like, spending time with the Amish even. This community banding together, or if somebody's house burned down, I would imagine in an Amish community, everybody come out in force and help build a person a house.
It's very interesting. And I found this very challenging, right? I'm not religious, I'm gay. So I found it quite challenging to spend time with the Amish and realize the truth of this, which is there's pretty good evidence that groups like the Hutterites and the Amish, and Hutterites are very similar way to the Amish, have the lowest levels of depression in American society, right? Despite the fact that they don't treat women well, you know, there's lots of things I object to. They don't treat women, people well at all, right? Why is that? How can that be? It's because they have a very deep sense of meaning and purpose. They have very high equality. The richest Amish man is as wealthy as the poorest Amish man. The richest Amish woman is as wealthy as the poorest Amish woman. There's inequality between genders, which I'm opposed to. They are not at all lonely, right? They are profoundly socially connected. They're socially connected all the time. They don't think life is about money and showing off. They're not constantly looking at their phones. In fact, they literally don't have phones. Or they have landlines. Some of them have landlines. Now, I'm not suggesting we all convert to become Amish, right? There's a lot of things I really don't like about the way the Amish live. But again, we should have the humility to learn from that, right?
Yeah.
The fact that some of the poorest Americans are some of the happiest Americans, and the Amish are among the poorest Americans, that tells us something about how we're seeking happiness in all the wrong all the wrong places, and that there are solutions out there, right? And no society is perfect, and the Amish are certainly deeply imperfect, but it helps us to understand a lot of things that are going wrong.
I love all of that. I want to respect your time. If I may, let me kind of tie a bow around a little bit of this for everybody. Is number one, those that you think are depressed, or yourself, or whatever, I would say number one, tell them they're valuable. Tell them that you love them. Tell them that your life is enriched by their just existing, number one. I just still like the whole do something, make your bed, do something, but then look to try to find some kind of meaning. I mean, the underlying thing for me is connection to purpose, connection to purpose, connection to purpose. What is it? What kind of song can you sing? But I've really enjoyed this. It's been just a wealth of information. I'm enriched by this, and I would probably even go to kind of put a cherry on top of this. I don't know you, but I appreciate you, and your TED Talk impacted me like it did millions of others. Your book impacted me. I strongly recommend. We'll put links in the article and everything here. Pick up a copy of Lost Connections. Really dwell on connection and purpose, and then maybe from a social perspective, what we can do. I still think that it happens maybe both, because I can't wait for the cavalry to show up. What am I going to do to the people that are important to me today? Let's act purposefully like that, and then move forward. But
yeah, I think that's really important. I would put it slightly differently. Although I agree with everything you just said, we can't wait for the cavalry to show up. We can be the cavalry. Right?
Oh, I love that.
And you know, the Maya Angelou said, "We are the people we've been waiting for." Right?
I love that.
You think about, I mean, the transformation in the way gay people are treated. You know, I mean, gay people were abused for 2,000 years. And then we're speaking, I think, a few days before the anniversary of the Stonewall riots, where it just took someone to say, you know what? You're not going to do this to us anymore, right? We're not going to put up with this anymore. And appealing in a spirit of love and compassion to other people. Yeah. And over time, that led to incredible transformation. The other thing I would say to people is not just, if you know people who are depressed and anxious, as we all do, not just to say I love and value you, but to say your pain makes sense. This is, to me, the most important message. The biggest problem with what we've done by telling this entirely biological story about depression, and I stress again, there's some biological components, but by telling an entirely biological story, what we've said to people is your pain doesn't mean anything. It's like a glitch in a computer program. I'm looking at you through my laptop screen and it's got a line through it because I dropped my laptop a few days ago. We've basically said that depression is like that. It's just like a glitch. It's not. You feel these ways for reasons. These reasons are totally understandable. They are basic human needs, right? And it's not your fault that we built a society that doesn't meet those needs. But together we can change that, right?
And there is hope. You are somebody that has struggled personally with depression. I am somebody that has struggled personally with depression. I try to keep a watchful, wary eye for it, but I can say today, for quite a long time, no drugs, no anything like that, and I'm pretty happy. I purposely now strive to do the things that are going to provide meaning and value and happiness to me, and I would assume the same for you. Like you're doing great things.
Thanks, Rob. And I think I think there's two aspects to that, isn't there? I was in a very fortunate position where I was able to change my life. Some of my relatives are not. And that's why we need to change the society to free up more people so they can make the big and deep changes that we need to make. I should just say also that I get told off because I always forget to say this. My publisher always tells me off. Anyone who wants any more information about my books,
yes,
where to find me, can go to all the audiobooks of my books, which are both available. If you go to www.john for November, N for November, HARI.com, johannhari.com. You can watch my TED Talk, you can see where to follow me on social media, you can see where to get my books or audiobooks.
Your TED Talk is going to be in this article here. Everybody's going to see it. Your books are in this article here. Your website is in this article here. Thank you for your time. I don't want to keep you any longer, although I want to keep you longer.
I really admire what you're doing, Rob, and everyone at Recovery Today, and I'm really grateful to you for making the time to speak to me as well. Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure. Take care.
And Rob, will you send me a link when it's up, and I'll
absolutely I will.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
No, have a good day.
Okay.
Bye.